that you had for the last one. How first discussion on CVs and cover letters? Okay, about half of you. So mainly what we want to do is provide an opportunity for you to ask questions, but I wanted to outline a little bit about how the research statement usually fits in with the whole application package. And in particular, one difference between the cover letter and the CV that we talked about last time, those are pretty much formula driven. There's not a lot of difference in the way CVs are constructed. There's a formula for doing it, and you should pretty much stick to that. And the same is pretty much true for the cover letter also. There are certain things that just really need to be in the cover letter. It needs to be concise. We talked about the length. If you remember, Claudia insisted that it should be no longer than 1 page. I thought 2 pages was okay, but I don't think anybody thinks that it should be much more than 2 pages, if it is more than 2 pages. Research statements and teaching statements, on the other hand, are going to be widely varying depending on your background and the type of job that you're applying for. So we'll be talking specifically about research statements today, and in the next session, Claudia will be leading a discussion of the teaching statements. But you need to be aware that the type of institution that you're applying to will make a big difference in what your teaching or research statement looks like. So for example, at a Research 1 type institution where research is a primary concern, you're probably going to have a more extensive research statement, and then you need to have a teaching statement also, but it's going to be somewhat secondary to the research statement. Whereas at a four-year school or a comprehensive master's level institution where teaching is a higher priority usually, they may put a lot more emphasis on the teaching statement than they do on the research statement. So I think the first strong piece of advice here is read the advertisement for the position very, very carefully. Determine what it is they're looking for, and then you need to tailor your research and teaching statements to fit whatever that job happens to be. Don't just use a generic teaching statement that you write one time at the beginning of the application season and just send it to every place that you apply and write a research statement and send that generic one to everyone that you apply for. Because they are going to, most ads have very specific requirements. They have something they're looking for. Certainly in a research university, they're probably going to have a specific area that you might be teaching in, and in specific areas that they want you to be doing research in. And so they're going to be looking for the answers to what is it, how is it you're going to fit with this position based on what you say in your research statement and your teaching statement. Often at a comprehensive university or a four-year college, they may be much less specific. They may just want somebody in a general area within your discipline and not be as specific about exactly what they want. And you need to take that into account also in the statements that you write. There's the last kind of general statement I want to make is that the form and style of research and teaching statements also varies among the disciplines. So how many of you are humanities type disciplines? Nobody today. We had a few people the first time. How about social sciences and natural sciences, mathematics, the rest of you? You will find that the expectation of what the research or teaching statement might look like is going to be different in different disciplines. And also, if you start going and looking at some of these links and references, you got to look carefully to see what field are they writing about. Because depending on the point of view of the person who writes the particular reference that's here, the advice that's in there may be tailored towards a humanities type discipline as opposed to a science, or a science type discipline as opposed to humanities. And I guess a good example of that, if you, I took one of these references, which was a very current one, and Cheryl Ball has written a whole series on how to produce an application for an academic position. She was one of the references that you were given last time for the the CVs and the cover letters. And it just so happens the day that I started searching on these was October 6th. And here on that very day was her latest post, which was about writing research statements. But if you read, you don't have to go too far before you find out that she's writing this from the point of view of an English department advertisement. So somebody with a PhD in English who's applying for academic positions in English and literature. So that will make a difference in some of the things that she discusses here. She recommends, and I think this is a good idea, that you start early in writing these statements, that you make drafts of a teaching statement and a research statement, so sort of a generic statement, but that you don't just send that generic statement to each place, that you then use that draft to tailor to the ad that you're applying for. So there are certain things that need to be in any statement no matter where it's going, and you can have a generic one, but always read very carefully what they're looking for and rewrite your draft to fit that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
In general, I would say make life easy for the people who are going to read your file. These are all busy people, and you don't want them to have to look for something. So let's say in chemistry, right? So we advertise for a position, we'll get way over 100 applicants. So that's a huge file cabinet filled with files. Okay, and so now you're supposed to look at this and decide, well, who are, let's say, the top 5 of these 100 plus applicants. So if you get a not very well organized application file, you're just going to put it aside and go to the next one. Okay. If you're going to read 100 applications, so just think about this, right? And let's say for your research statement, you wrote 20 pages. 100 times 20 pages is a lot of reading. No one is going to do that. So what I have seen in chemistry applications, and what I would suggest, is have a one-page summary for your research goals. So in the sciences, often you have 3 research projects, sort of one that's going to work, one that is a little bit longer ranged and should work, and then you sort of, dream on, by the time I get tenure, I will have this solved, after many graduate students have slaved over this for years.
And a few postdocs.
And a few postdocs, yes. So, and let's say for each project you will write 3 pages, or 4, including figures, right? But then it would be really nice to have one page that summarizes the 3 projects just in a paragraph. And the reason for that is, this is now for Research University, we're looking to fill a specific position. So what I'm reading for is the research you're proposing to do what we're looking for? And if I can't figure it out, I assume it's not, right? So if I'm looking for an inorganic chemist and I can't figure out if what you're really going to do is inorganic chemistry, then I'll just look at the next file. But if and Alan was saying, read the ad. If they're looking for an inorganic chemistry, perhaps use the terminology somewhere in your research description. Don't talk about organic synthesis for an inorganic search. And so if you have a nice figure that summarizes the research area, so a good visual, and then one paragraph, no more than a third of a page, better a quarter of a page, that just succinctly states what you're going to do. And then after that, have, let's say, 10 or 12 pages of more detail. So if I like what I'm reading here, I'll go read the next part. But if you can't capture my interest on the first page, I'm not going to go on. And it's simply because I have too much reading to do. So I'm trying to find candidates that match our search criteria. So if all you give me is a single 10-page document and I have to read through this to figure out what you're going to do, I'm not going to finish it. Unless you really write well and it's just riveting reading, and then maybe. But keep in mind, really, that the people who are going to read your applications are very busy. They don't have much time, and you really need to catch their attention visually and quickly. If you don't do that, they'll just move on to the next candidate.
Another use for that very succinct description of your research plans is that can go in your cover letter also. Remember, you have a very limited amount of space in the cover letter, but you need to address this exact same topic. So one of the things that Cheryl Wall recommends that you do is you write a very concise summary of the work that you've done, your dissertation and your postdoc research, and that can be used in the cover letter if it's short enough. It may need to be shortened a little bit, but it can also then be expanded into your research statement. And the same for your plans on the research. You need a short, concise paragraph in your cover letter. Well, you can write it it better match what you say in your research statement too. So those things need to be coordinated with each other.
I wouldn't put a whole paragraph on. You're better off just summarizing the 3 research areas you're interested in. I'm going to pursue this, this, and this. Just one
research statement.
One sentence statement, so that when somebody reads the cover letter, they not only get an impression on where you've been, what your background is. You've gotten a PhD in inorganic chemistry, ideally. You've done a postdoc, with whom, doing what, and what are you planning on doing. So, people will start with the cover letter, maybe glance at your CV, and then usually move on to your research statement. And so, in between those 3 things, you have to make a case for yourself. The more detailed part becomes important when you start comparing, your top 10. Then you read them in depth and really very carefully compare them. But initially, you just got to get not discarded, right? You got to get picked into the top 10. That's your initial goal. And the next goal then is out of those top 10 to rise to the top 3 or 4, because that's how many people get invited. So, and you're not going to do this, okay, this is personal preference on my part. Don't use like 10-point font. I only want to get this on 1 page, so I'm going to shrink the font down, I'm going to widen the margin. Don't do that, right? These are people like me. I have reading glasses. I really hate it when the type is small.
And you know that trick.
Well, and it annoys me because it's not necessary, right? If you can't get your thoughts on 1 page, you have a problem anyway. But if it's too small, I won't read it. It just gives me a headache, and it also puts me in a bad mood. And you don't want to put the reader in a bad mood, right? It's like when you submit a proposal for funding. You want the person reading it be interested, excited about it, and then it's done, and they say, wow, this was really great, excellent. That's your goal. And the same thing is true here. The critical information, this is now in the sciences, like in chemistry. The critical information that you look for is the background of a person, and this should be in your cover letter. And what are you going to do, right? I'm looking for someone, let's say in the past we've looked for organic chemists. We needed someone who could teach organic chemistry. That, by the way, in your teaching statement is important to say, I could teach these courses. Not I could teach anything. That number one, that's not true, and that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for someone who can teach very specific things. So when it comes to your teaching philosophy, somewhere in there, you should mention what you think you could teach. This is obviously field dependent. And that, at some level, also determines how well you match the search. Right? If they're looking for an organic chemist, and you say, I could teach inorganic chemistry, there's a disconnect here, right? They're going to say, well, he's applying for an organic position, he wants to teach inorganic, he's not an organic chemist. That file's done. So, if you're borderline,